Rob tossed my belongings out the second-story window as the neighbors watched. My favorite sweater landed on Mrs. Henderson's rose bushes, and he laughed like it was the funniest joke in the world. Just 1 week after my daughter's funeral, this man decided I was no longer welcome in the house where I had cared for his wife, Carol, through her battle with cancer. Where are you watching from today? Drop your location in the comments, give us a like, and subscribe to the channel. It all started this morning when I came down for breakfast, as I had every day since Carol died 2 months ago. Rob was in the kitchen with a smile that promised trouble, that specific grin he used when he was about to say something particularly cruel. "Eleanor," he said without even looking up from his paper, "we need to talk. We need to talk." In my 64 years of life, I'd learned that phrase never preceded anything good. I poured my coffee, my hands already sensing the impending storm. "Carol is dead," Rob continued with the emotional subtlety of a jackhammer. "There's no reason for you to keep living here anymore." The words hit me like a physical slap. Carol, my only child, my treasure, had been in her grave for barely 2 months, and this man was already trying to erase every trace of our family from his life. "This house has been my home for 5 years," I managed to say, though my voice sounded strangely far away. "I cared for your wife here until her last breath." Rob let out a chilling laugh. "And I appreciate that, Eleanor. But that's over now. This house is in my name, and I need space. Just space." As if the 5 years I'd spent nursing my sick daughter, cooking, cleaning, being her round-the-clock caregiver, had been some kind of invasion of his privacy. "I need time to look for a place," I pleaded, trying to maintain some dignity. "You had time," he snapped. "A week was enough." Rob slammed the newspaper shut. "I want you out today." "Today?" My voice broke despite my best efforts. "Rob, please, at least let me organize my things. Find an apartment." "Your things are already organized," he said with that perfected cruel smile. "I packed them up last night. They're in trash bags in your room." I climbed the stairs on trembling legs. My room, which had been my refuge for 5 years, was completely ransacked. My clothes, my books, my photographs, everything was crammed into black trash bags, like I was literally and figuratively garbage. In the bag holding my photographs, I found the last picture Carol and I took together. She was so thin, so pale, but she was smiling with that bravery that characterized her until the end. "Mom," she'd told me that day, "promise me you'll always be strong. Promise you'll never let anyone make you feel less than your worth." How ironic that promise felt now. When I came back down with my first bag, Rob was already opening the second-story window. "What are you doing?" I asked. "Helping you move out," he replied. Before I could stop him, he grabbed my bag and flung it out the window. "Rob, you're crazy." But he had already snatched another bag. My books scattered across the lawn like wounded birds. Then came another bag. This one held my underwear, which I had carefully washed and folded last night, not knowing it would be the last time I'd use Carol's washing machine. Neighbors started coming out of their homes. Mrs. Henderson, who had lived next door for 20 years, stood frozen in her yard, mouth agape. The children across the street stopped playing to watch the spectacle. A woman I knew from the grocery store pulled out her phone and started recording. "Rob, please stop," I screamed as I watched my possessions fly through the air. Some snagged on the utility wires, others landed in the neighbor's yard. "This is what happens," Rob yelled for everyone to hear, "when people abuse hospitality. 5 years living here rent-free, rent-free." This man had conveniently forgotten that during those 5 years I had cared for his sick wife 24 hours a day. That I was the one who drove her to chemotherapy when he was too busy at work. That I was the one who comforted her in the middle of the night when the pain was unbearable. When he finished emptying my room, Rob came downstairs and stood in front of me, arms crossed. "Now take your things and get out. I don't ever want to see you around here again." "Rob," I said, and my voice finally found some of the strength Carol wanted me to have. "Someday, you are going to regret this." "The only thing I'll regret," he sneered, "is waiting so long." I gathered what I could of my scattered belongings. The neighbors helped me in silence, some with tears in their eyes. Mrs. Henderson whispered that I could stay at her house that night. As I loaded the last bag, I glanced up at Carol's bedroom window. Rob was standing there, watching me with satisfaction. But I was no longer the broken woman who had climbed those stairs an hour ago. Carol had taught me something about death. that sometimes the most important things are revealed only after everything seems lost. That afternoon, while sorting my things at Mrs. Henderson's, I found something I had completely forgotten about. A letter Carol had given me weeks before she died. "Don't open it until after the funeral," she had said. "And when you do, don't show it to Rob until the right time." With trembling hands, I opened the envelope. What I read inside would change everything. Carol's letter was shaking in my hands as I read it for the third time. "Mom, if you're reading this, it's because Rob has shown his true colors. Don't worry, everything's accounted for. You are listed as the beneficiary on all my accounts. Go to Attorney Miller's office next Tuesday at 10 in the morning. And Mom, prepare for a surprise." Mrs. Henderson brought me a cup of chamomile tea and sat beside me in her small living room. She had witnessed the whole spectacle that morning, and her kind face still showed shock. "Eleanor, honey," she said with that maternal softness that had comforted me so many times during Carol's illness, "that Rob always gave me a bad feeling, but I never thought he was capable of this. I hadn't thought so either. During the first years of his marriage to Carol, Rob had been charming, attentive, affectionate, seemingly devoted. Of course, Carol had always kept her finances completely separate. She said it was for practical reasons, but it had always seemed smart to me. "Can I ask you something?" Mrs. Henderson said, looking at the letter still in my hand. "Did Carol say anything to you before she passed? Anything about what might happen later?" I remembered those last weeks. Carol had been strangely calm. Considering the circumstances, she had spent hours organizing documents, making calls, updating papers. When I asked what she was doing, she would say she was putting everything in order so you don't have worries, Mom. I thought she meant her personal things, photos, memories. I never imagined she meant this. "Maybe she did," I said, pointing toward the window in the direction of what had been my home for 5 years. My phone rang. Rob's name flashed on the screen. Mrs. Henderson frowned. "Don't answer him," she said. "That man has done enough damage for one day." But something inside me urged me to answer. Maybe it was curiosity, or maybe it was that new feeling that had started to grow since reading Carol's letter. A strange sense that things were about to change dramatically. "Eleanor." Rob's voice sounded different, less triumphant, more nervous. "I need to ask you something." "What do you want, Rob? Is there anything left of mine you haven't thrown out the window yet?" He cleared his throat. Did she tell you anything about documents? Important papers?" "Interesting? Very interesting." "What kind of papers?" "I don't know. Will, life insurance, bank information. Important things, you know." "Important things." As if I, a 64-year-old woman who had raised a daughter alone and cared for her until her death, knew nothing about important things. "Why are you asking me that?" I said, though I already knew the answer. "Well, I've been searching all over the house and I can't find certain documents. Carol was always very private about those things." Private? What a diplomatic way of saying Carol had never fully trusted him. "No," I lied without batting an eye. "Carol never talked to me about any of that in detail. I just know she always said she had some money saved from Grandpa's inheritance." "Some money saved? Did she tell you how much?" His voice held a desperate urgency I recognized from when he was little and had broken something important. "No, she never specified numbers. Are you sure?" "I'm sure, Rob, but I imagine the attorney will have all the details when they read the will." There was a long silence. "The will? When is that?" "I don't know. I guess they'll contact us soon." Rob hung up abruptly. Mrs. Henderson chuckled despite the gravity of the situation. "Eleanor, that man is terrified." "Yes," I replied, feeling something akin to hope for the first time in months. "And something tells me he has good reason to be." That night, trying to sleep in Mrs. Henderson's guest room, I thought about all the signs I had ignored. Rob had always asked about Carol's finances, but casually, as if it were normal marital curiosity. Carol always gave vague answers. "I have a little put away, honey. Don't worry about that now." I also remembered something else. The last time Carol had gone to the bank, she had insisted on going alone even though Rob had offered to accompany her. "It's personal," she'd told him. "Women's stuff you wouldn't be interested in." When she returned that afternoon, Carol looked relieved. Yes, that was the word. As if she had finished a very important project. Everything good at the bank? Rob had asked her the night at dinner. Perfectly fine. Carol had replied with a smile that now, remembering it, seemed slightly mysterious. Everything is exactly as it should be. The next day, Saturday, I decided to do something Carol had specifically implied in her letter. Visit the bank where she held her main accounts. I brought my ID and Carol's death certificate. At the bank, I asked to speak to someone about my deceased daughter's accounts. The teller, a middle-aged woman with a kind face, checked her system. Ms. Vasquez, she said after a few minutes, I see you are registered as the primary beneficiary on several accounts. Do you need information on the transfer process? Primary beneficiary. Rob had been hunting for documents because he had no idea Carol had arranged for the money to come directly to me. Yes, please. Could you give me a summary of everything? The employee typed on her computer for several minutes. Her eyebrows progressively lifted. Ms. Vasquez, she finally said, I think you'll want to sit down for this. The number on the computer screen couldn't be real. $450,000? Carol had $450,000 in that account, and I was the sole beneficiary. Are you sure that figure is correct? I asked the bank employee, feeling my legs tremble. Yes, ma'am, and that's just one of the accounts. She kept typing. There's also a high-yield savings account with an additional $250,000 and a long-term CD investment of $500,000 that matures next month. $1.2 million. My Carol, who had always lived modestly, who always told me she and Rob had to watch every penny, had over $1 million saved. Is there more? I asked, feeling as if I were in a dream. The employee looked at me with an odd expression. Ms. Vasquez, did your daughter never tell you about the properties? The properties. Carol had vaguely mentioned investing some of Grandpa's inheritance, but she never specified in what. What properties exactly? According to our records of paid-off mortgages, she owns 2 small rental condos downtown and a 40% stake in a commercial retail space. How much is all that worth? I would need to consult an appraiser for exact figures, but approximately $600,000 to $700,000 more. $1.8 million. Carol had an estate of nearly $1.8 million, all carefully invested and managed without Rob knowing the real magnitude. Ms. Vasquez, there is one more thing you should know, the employee continued. Your daughter came here 6 months ago and made some significant changes to her beneficiaries and the instructions for her accounts. 6 months. That had been right when Carol had started acting strangely, more reserved, more determined. What kind of changes? She ensured you would have immediate, full access to all funds upon her death. She also left specific instructions that no information about these accounts be provided to any other person without a court order. Not even her husband. Especially not her husband. Her exact words were that he didn't need the information for anything good. Carol had known. Somehow she had known exactly what Rob would do after her death and had taken steps to protect me. Do I need any special documents to access these accounts? I asked. Just the death certificate you brought. And your own ID. The process can begin immediately. You'll also need to meet with the attorney who handled your daughter's affairs to formalize everything legally. Attorney Miller? Yes, exactly. He has all the documentation regarding the properties and other assets. I left the bank feeling like I had just discovered I had superpowers. Rob had thrown me out of my home. He had humiliated his dead wife's mother in front of the entire neighborhood. He had tossed my belongings out the window like trash, and now it turned out I was practically a millionaire. My phone rang. Rob, again. Eleanor? His voice sounded sweeter than honey. I've been thinking, maybe I was a little hasty yesterday. My grief is confusing me. Now it's grief. Yesterday I had abused his hospitality for 5 years. Look, how about you come for dinner tonight? We can talk. Maybe we can reach an arrangement. An arrangement? What interesting timing. What kind of arrangement, Rob? Well, the house is big. Maybe there's room for both of us. Carol would have wanted her family to stick together. This man had spent a week treating me like an old piece of furniture. And now that he couldn't find information about Carol's finances, he suddenly remembered the importance of family. That's a very generous proposal, Rob, I said, letting my voice drip with sarcasm. But I already have plans. What plans? Eleanor, be reasonable. Where are you going to live? With what money? With what money? If only he knew. Don't worry about me, Rob. Carol made sure I was well taken care of. What do you mean by that? You'll find out soon. Attorney Miller is going to contact us this week for the will reading. Eleanor, if Carol left you something, we should handle it together. We were family. Rob, can I ask you something? Yes, of course. When was the last time you told Carol you loved her? The question took him by surprise. There was a long silence. What kind of question is that? A simple question. When was the last time? Eleanor, I don't understand what that has to do with... Was it before or after you started spending so much time at the local tavern near your office? The silence this time was absolute. I could hear his breathing through the phone. I don't know what you're talking about, he finally said, but his voice sounded choked. Of course not. Just like you didn't know Carol had a lot more money than you ever imagined. I hung up the phone and headed back to Mrs. Henderson's. I had to prepare for the appointment with Attorney Miller on Tuesday. But more importantly, I had to decide exactly how I was going to use this information. Carol had been strategic until the end. She had put me in a position to be financially independent. But more than that, she had given me the power to choose exactly how I wanted the rest of my life to go. And after 5 years of being invisible, after a week of being treated like a nuisance, after being publicly humiliated yesterday by a man who owed my daughter everything, I knew exactly what I wanted to do with that power. Rob wanted information. Rob wanted access to Carol's fortune. Rob was going to get exactly what he deserved, a lesson he would never forget. But first, he was going to know exactly what he had lost, due to his cruelty. Tuesday morning, I woke up with a mental clarity I hadn't felt in years. I put on my best black dress, the one I had worn to Carol's funeral. I did my makeup carefully and headed to Attorney Miller's office. The office was in the city's historic downtown, in an old building with high ceilings and enormous windows. Mr. Miller was an older man, about 70, with a perfectly trimmed white beard and eyes that radiated both intelligence and warmth. Ms. Vasquez, he said, rising from his desk when I entered, I am so sorry for your loss. Carol was an extraordinary young woman. Thank you. I received the letter she left me. Yes, Carol asked me to give it to you after her passing. She also left me very specific instructions about this meeting. He opened a thick folder on his desk. May I ask you what has happened since the funeral? I told him everything. Rob throwing me out of the house, tossing my belongings out the window, the public humiliation, his desperate calls seeking financial information. Attorney Miller nodded gravely. Carol predicted exactly this. She told me, Mr. Miller, Rob is going to show his true colors as soon as I die. He's going to treat my mother like trash because he thinks he no longer needs her for anything. Hearing those words broke my heart. Carol had known what was going to happen. But she also told me something else, the attorney continued. My mother is the strongest woman I know. Once she knows the whole truth, she will know exactly what to do. The whole truth? Mr. Miller smiled. Ms. Vasquez, from what I gather, you've already visited the bank. I told him about my visit, about the $1.2 million in accounts, about the properties. That's most of the story, he said, but there are a few additional details you need to know. He opened the folder and began pulling out documents. In addition to what you already know, Carol had a small stake in 2 local companies that generated regular dividends. More papers, more numbers. How much? What's the total? According to my latest calculation, around $1.8 million. $1.8 million, I was speechless. But here comes the most interesting part, the attorney continued. Rob knows none of this. Carol kept all her finances completely separate from him from the day they married. Why? Because her grandfather, the man who left her the initial inheritance, did not trust Rob. He warned Carol to keep her money separate until she was completely sure of her husband's character. It turns out Grandpa was right. Mr. Miller took out another document. This is Carol's will. She was very specific about what she wanted to happen. He read aloud. I leave all my assets, properties, investments, and cash to my mother, Eleanor Vasquez. She has been the only person in my life who has loved me unconditionally, who has cared for me without expecting anything in return, who has put my well-being above her own. I had tears in my eyes, but the attorney wasn't finished. As for my husband, Robert Medina, I leave him the house we lived in, completely paid off, and the furniture. I consider this more than fair, considering he never contributed financially to the purchase of that house. The money for the purchase came from my own investments. Rob didn't pay for the house? No. Carol bought it 5 years ago with money from her investments. Rob pays a monthly amount that he believes is the mortgage, but Carol actually deposited it into a savings account, which she also leaves to you. Everything made sense now. Rob had been living a lie for years, believing he was paying for a house that was actually completely Carol's. Is there more? I asked, because the smile on Attorney Miller's face told me there was. Carol also left instructions on when to reveal this information. She wanted Rob to have time to show his true character before you knew the truth. She specifically asked me to wait until he threw you out of the house. She knew he would do it. She knew it for a fact. She also asked me to give you this. He handed me a sealed envelope with my name written in Carol's handwriting. But Ms. Vasquez, there is one more thing you need to know. Rob has been calling my office every day since Monday, asking about Carol's will. I told him the will would be read Friday at 3 in the afternoon, and that both he and you must be present. The attorney's smile turned slightly malicious. It's going to be a very revealing afternoon. Is there anything about inheritance taxes I should know? Carol thought of that too. She had a specific insurance policy to cover any taxes that might apply. You will receive the net inheritance with no fiscal worries. I left the attorney's office feeling like I had just discovered I had superpowers. Carol hadn't just left me financial security. She had given me the opportunity to see Rob's face when he realized what he had lost, due to his cruelty. My phone rang before I reached the end of the block. Eleanor. Rob's voice sounded sickly sweet. I've been thinking about our conversation yesterday. Maybe I was a little hasty with this whole change thing. A little hasty? Rob, you kicked me out of my home and threw my underwear into the street. It was, a mistake. The grief is confusing me. How about we have dinner today? We can talk, as a family. As a family. As if he had ever treated family with respect in the last few months. Have you heard anything about the will reading? He asked, trying to sound casual. There it was. The real reason for his call. Friday at 3, I told him, at Attorney Miller's office. Perfect. Eleanor, have you found any of Carol's papers among your things? Bank documents, insurance, that kind of stuff. Why are you asking me that, Rob? Well, for the will, we need to have all the information complete. I want to make sure we handle everything appropriately. That we handle everything appropriately. As if we were a team. As if he hadn't kicked me out of the house 4 days ago. I haven't found anything specific, I lied smoothly. But I'm sure the attorney will have everything we need. Yeah? Sure. Well, what about dinner? I think I'll pass, Rob. But thanks for the invitation. Eleanor, please, I know I've made mistakes. Let me make it up to you. You know what? You're right. You've made mistakes. But Friday, you're going to have the chance to see exactly how costly those mistakes were. I hung up the phone and opened Carol's second letter. Carol's letter was typically direct, just as my daughter had been in life. Mom, if you're reading this, it means Rob already kicked you out of the house and is now desperately searching for information about my money. He's probably calling you with that sweet voice he used when he wanted something from me. Don't tell him. Let him suffer until Friday. There's one more thing you need to know. During the last 6 months of my life, I discovered Rob has not been faithful. The woman is named Veronica Smith. She is 26 years old, and she works at the local tavern near his office. I know because I hired a private investigator to confirm it. I have photos, Mom. I have recorded conversations. I have evidence that he was planning a future with her based on what he believed would be his inheritance after my death. Use this information as you wish. You decide if it's relevant to what's coming. My hands trembled as I finished reading. Carol had known about Rob's infidelity and hadn't said a word. She had kept fighting cancer, endured the treatments, held onto hope, all while knowing her husband was betraying her. Inside the envelope was a USB drive with a note. Everything is here. Photos, recordings, evidence. Only use it if you feel it's necessary. That night at Mrs. Henderson's, I plugged the USB drive into her computer. The photos broke my heart. Rob and a young blonde woman holding hands at a cafe. Rob buying her a necklace at a jewelry store, a necklace more expensive than anything he had bought Carol in years. But what affected me the most were the audio recordings. The investigator had managed to record some of their conversations. Rob, just a few more weeks, my love. Once everything is settled, we can be together openly. Veronica, are you sure she doesn't suspect anything? Rob, Carol is too sick to suspect anything, and besides, she's been so focused on organizing her things. Veronica, and after, what about us? Rob, after, we're going to be very comfortable financially. Carol has a lot of money saved. We're going to be able to have the life we deserve. I closed the computer, feeling a mix of sadness and determination I had never experienced before. Rob hadn't just been cruel to me. He had been planning his future with another woman while my daughter was dying, basing that future on Carol's money. Wednesday morning, I decided to do something Carol would have approved, verify for myself what was in those recordings. I went to the tavern where Veronica Smith worked. It was a modest place with wooden tables and decor that tried to be upscale but didn't quite make it. Veronica was behind the bar, exactly as Carol had described. Young, blonde, with that artificial beauty that requires a lot of upkeep. I ordered a coffee and sat at a table from which I could discreetly observe her. I didn't have to wait long. Rob arrived at 11:30, exactly as he had been doing during the last months of Carol's illness. He approached the bar and kissed Veronica on the cheek as if it were the most natural thing in the world. "How are you doing with the papers?" I heard her ask him. "Still looking. Carol hid them really well. But don't worry. Friday at the will reading, I'll know exactly how much there is." "Are you sure she left you everything?" Rob laughed with a confidence that made me nauseous. "We were married, my love. Legally, everything she owned is mine now." Veronica poured him a beer. "And the mother-in-law, isn't she going to be a problem?" "Not at all. I already got rid of her. Kicked her out Monday. It was time she understood she was no longer needed." Needed, as if my purpose in life had been solely to care for Carol for his convenience. "Don't you feel bad for kicking her out?" Veronica asked, though her tone suggested the question was more curiosity than genuine concern. "Why would I feel bad? That woman lived rent-free for 5 years. Carol was too sentimental about her." Carol was too sentimental. Carol had been sentimental enough not to tell anyone about his affair. Carol had been sentimental enough to continue treating him with respect, even when she knew he was betraying her. "But now comes the good part," Rob continued. "Carol had a lot of money saved. We're going to be able to buy that house on the coast you want." "How much money do you think there is?" Veronica asked. "I'm not sure of the exact total, but it has to be a substantial amount. Carol was always very careful with money. There must be at least $400,000 or $600,000. 400 or 600,000. Rob had no idea of the true magnitude of Carol's fortune. "Just 2 more days," Rob said after finishing his beer. "2 more days, and we'll know exactly how rich we're going to be." After Rob left, I approached the bar. "Excuse me," I said to Veronica. "That man who was here just now, is he your boyfriend?" Veronica looked at me suspiciously. "Why do you ask?" "Because I think I knew his wife." "Carol Medina? Didn't she just die of cancer recently?" Veronica's face turned beet red. I don't know what you're talking about." "Of course not," I said with a smile Carol would have recognized. "But Friday at 3 in the afternoon at Attorney Miller's office, you're going to know exactly what I'm talking about." I left the bar, feeling a strange mix of sadness for Carol and anticipation for what was coming. Rob had built an entire fantasy based on my daughter's money. In 2 days, that fantasy was going to crash into reality in a way he would never forget. Thursday morning, Rob showed up at Mrs. Henderson's house. I saw him from the kitchen window. He was standing in the front yard with a bouquet of flowers and what looked like a box of expensive chocolates. "Eleanor," he yelled toward the window, "I need to talk to you. It's important." Mrs. Henderson peered out beside me. "Want me to tell him you're not here?" "No," I replied, feeling that new confidence that had been growing in me all week. "I want to hear what he has to say." I walked out to the yard. Rob looked awful. He had deep circles under his eyes, wrinkled clothes, and that desperate air of someone losing control of the situation. "Eleanor, my dear Eleanor," he began, with a voice dripping with false emotion. I've been doing a lot of thinking these last few days. Really? And what conclusions have you come to? He handed me the flowers and chocolates. That I was a monster to you. The grief over Carol's death drove me crazy. I didn't know what I was doing. The flowers were red roses, expensive, and the chocolates were a Belgian brand I recognized as quite costly. Rob was investing real money in this apology, which told me exactly how desperate he was. Rob, what exactly do you want? I want you to come home. I want us to be family again. Carol would have wanted us to take care of each other. The same man who had been planning his future with another woman while Carol was dying was now invoking her wishes. And how exactly do you propose we be family? Well, you could help out with the house, cook, clean, that kind of thing. And I'd make sure you had everything you needed. Everything I needed. As if I were a pet he was considering readopting. And what room would I sleep in? Because I remember you said Monday that the house was yours and I had been abusing your hospitality. That was a misunderstanding. Of course, you can use your old room. The house is too big for me alone. My old room, the room where I had lived for 5 years caring for his sick wife, while he slept with a 26-year-old waitress. Rob, can I ask you something? Of course, anything you want. Where were you yesterday at 11:30 in the morning? The question caught him completely off guard. His face went through several expressions: confusion, panic, and finally a forced smile. Yesterday? I was working at the office. Are you sure? Weren't you perhaps at a downtown tavern drinking a beer? Rob went pale. Eleanor, I don't know what you're talking about. Of course not. Just like you know nothing about Veronica Smith. The name was like a physical blow. Rob staggered backward. Who told you that name? Carol. That's impossible. Carol didn't know. Didn't know what, Rob? Didn't know you've been cheating on her during her last months of life? Didn't know you were planning a future with another woman based on her money? Rob was speechless for a moment, his mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. Eleanor, can I explain? Oh, I'm sure you can. I'm sure you have a very creative explanation for why you told Veronica you were going to be rich after Carol died. How do you know that? Because Carol wasn't stupid, Rob. She was a smart woman who figured out what was happening and decided to document everything. Rob dropped the mask of remorse he had been wearing. His face hardened. Look, Eleanor, what happened between Carol and me is none of your business. We were married adults. You're right, your marital problems didn't concern me. But kicking me out of my home, humiliating me in front of the neighbors, and calling me a freeloader after 5 years of caring for your sick wife, that concerns me. Fine, I made mistakes. What do you want me to do? Grovel? I don't want anything from you, Rob. Absolutely nothing. Then why are you torturing me with things from the past? I'm not torturing you. I'm just informing you that I know exactly what kind of man you are. Rob stepped closer, and for the first time since I'd known him, I saw something dangerous in his eyes. Eleanor, you are going back to the house, and you are going to act like this conversation never happened. Because if you don't, I'm going to make sure you don't see one dime of anything Carol left. There it was, the threat. The real reason he had come with flowers and expensive chocolates. And how exactly do you plan to do that? Very easily. I'm going to tell the attorney you're senile, that Carol was worried about your mental state before she died. I'm going to say you're not competent to handle money. I laughed. It was a genuine laugh from the bottom of my stomach because the irony was delicious. Rob, tomorrow at 3 in the afternoon, you're going to be at Attorney Miller's office for the will reading, right? Yes. And what? Nothing. I just wanted to make sure you didn't miss it. It's going to be the most expensive education of your life. Rob left, frustrated and confused, exactly how I wanted him to feel. But as I watched him walk away, I realized I had underestimated how desperate a man could become when he realized he was losing everything. That night, Mrs. Henderson found me reviewing the documents Attorney Miller had given me. Eleanor, honey, she said, are you sure you know what you're doing? Rob looked very upset when he left. I'm completely sure, Mrs. Henderson. For the first time in years, I'm completely sure of what I'm doing. That man won't take this lying down. She was right, but Carol had given me more than money. She had given me information, and information, as I had learned in my 64 years of life, was power. Friday couldn't come soon enough. Friday morning, I woke up feeling a mix of nerves and anticipation that I hadn't experienced since, well, probably never. I dressed carefully in my best black suit. I did my makeup more carefully than usual, and I even put on the pearl earrings Carol had given me for my last birthday. "You look beautiful," Mrs. Henderson told me as we ate breakfast. "But more than that, you look powerful." Powerful. What a strange word to describe a 64-year-old woman who a week earlier had been picking up her underwear from the lawn in front of all the neighbors. At 2:15, I arrived at Attorney Miller's office. Rob was already there, sitting in the waiting room with his hands clasped and that confident smile he had perfected over the years. He was wearing his best navy suit, the one Carol had bought him for their wedding anniversary. "Eleanor," he greeted me, rising, as if we were old friends meeting casually. "You look great. I'm glad you decided to come." As if I had a choice, as if I wasn't the beneficiary of my own daughter's will. "Rob," I replied politely, not bothering to get up from my chair. We sat in silence for several minutes. Rob constantly checked his phone, probably texting Veronica to keep her informed. At exactly 3 o'clock, Attorney Miller opened his office door. "Ms. Vasquez, Mr. Medina, please come in." We sat in chairs facing the attorney's desk. Rob immediately leaned forward, like an eager dog waiting for its treat. "Before we begin," Attorney Miller said, "I want to confirm that you both understand that this is the final, valid will of Carol Medina, signed 6 months ago in the presence of witnesses and properly notarized." "Yes, of course," Rob replied quickly. "Can we start? Well, there are things I need to plan." Things he needed to plan. Probably a celebration with Veronica. The attorney opened the folder and pulled out several documents. "Carol's will is quite direct, but before reading it, I need to inform you about the complete inventory of her assets." Rob straightened up even more. This was the part he had been waiting to hear. "Carol had several financial assets that may not be common knowledge," the attorney continued. "Allow me to give you a full summary." Over the next 15 minutes, Attorney Miller read a list that made Rob's face go from confident to confused, from confused to astonished, and from astonished to completely stupefied. The bank accounts, the investments, the rental condos, the commercial space, the business stakes, the savings from the mortgage payments Rob had been making. In total, the attorney concluded, Carol's estate amounts to approximately $1.8 million. Rob was speechless. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. Finally, he managed to articulate, $1,800,000, that's correct, the attorney confirmed. But how is that possible? Carol and I always lived modestly. She always said we had to watch every penny. Mr. Medina, did you have access to your wife's personal bank accounts? Well, I assumed we were married. I thought I knew our finances. Did your wife ever show you statements or give you access to her personal investments? Rob was silent. The answer was obvious, no. Very well, the attorney continued. We will now proceed with the reading of the will. The attorney began to read in a clear, professional voice. I, Carol Medina, in full use of my mental faculties and without any external pressure, declare this to be my last will and testament. Rob was leaning forward, listening to every word as if his life depended on it, which in a way it did. To my dear mother, Eleanor Vasquez, who has been the only constant of unconditional love in my life, I leave the totality of my financial assets, including all bank accounts, investments, rental properties, and business stakes. Rob leaped from his chair as if he had been electrocuted. Wait, that can't be right. The attorney looked at him calmly. Mr. Medina, please sit down. I have not finished. But Carol can't have left everything to her mother. I'm her husband. Mr. Medina, all the assets I just mentioned were solely in Carol's name. Legally, she was free to leave them to whomever she wished. Rob looked like he was about to vomit. But the house, at least the house, to you? Robert Medina, I leave the house located at 47 Oak Drive, free of mortgages, along with all the furniture and household goods contained therein. Rob collapsed into his chair. Just the house? The house is valued at approximately $350,000, the attorney said. It's a considerable inheritance. But that's over $1 million, Rob shouted. I was her husband. I have a legal right to something. Mr. Medina, Assets acquired through inheritance or before marriage remain separate property unless otherwise specified in a marital property agreement, which you never established. Carol inherited the foundation of her fortune from her grandfather and invested it using only her own name. Legally, you have no claim to those assets. Rob looked at me with an expression of pure hatred. You knew all this time. I found out this week, I replied calmly, when you unceremoniously threw me out of the house. This is a conspiracy. Eleanor manipulated Carol when she was sick. Attorney Miller raised a hand. Mr. Medina, the will was signed 6 months ago, when Carol was relatively stable. Furthermore, I have a letter that Carol asked me to read in case you made exactly this accusation. The attorney took out another document and began to read. If Rob accuses my mother of manipulation, I want it known that I made this decision after discovering that my husband has been having an extramarital affair during my illness. I have complete evidence of this infidelity, including plans he has made for his future, based on the money he expected to inherit from me. Rob went completely white. Is that true? I finished for the attorney. Yes, Rob, it's the truth. Carol knew everything about Veronica Smith. She knew about your plans to be rich. She knew you were using her money to fund your romance with another woman. Rob stood up, stumbling. I can't. This can't be happening. But it is happening, I said, keeping my voice perfectly calm. And you know what the most ironic thing of all is? If you had been a decent, faithful husband, if you hadn't kicked me out of the house like a dog, Carol probably would have left you much more. Rob looked at me with tears in his eyes. Eleanor, please, there must be something. There is something, Rob. Carol left you a debt-free house worth $350,000. You are a healthy, employed adult. If you can't build a decent life from that, the problem isn't how much money you have. Rob left the office without another word. Through the window, we watched him make a phone call, probably to Veronica to give her the devastating news. How do you feel, Ms. Vasquez? Attorney Miller asked me. I feel exactly how Carol wanted me to feel, I replied. Free. 20 minutes after Rob left the attorney's office, my phone rang. It was a number I didn't recognize. Ms. Vasquez? A young, tearful female voice asked. This is Veronica Smith. Rob told me that you kept all the money. Carol decided to leave me her personal estate, yes. But Rob told me we were going to have a life together. I'm sure you can have a life together. It's just going to be with less money than he promised you. There was a long pause, and then Veronica started crying harder. I didn't know Carol was so sick. Rob told me she had an illness, but that it wasn't serious. He told me the marriage had been over for years. Veronica, I said, feeling a strange mix of sorrow and justice. How long have you known Rob? 8 months. 8 months, exactly the time Carol was sickest. He told me he was going to divorce her, that he was just waiting for the right moment. The right moment was when Carol died and he could take her money. Veronica cried silently for a moment. Is it true that Carol knew about us? Carol knew everything, Veronica. She had photos, recordings, complete evidence. And even knowing all that, she left Rob a house to live in. That's more compassion than he deserved. Rob says he's going to contest the will. Rob can do what he wants, but the law is clear. And Carol was very careful with all the documentation. Do you hate me? The question surprised me. I don't hate you, Veronica. You're a young woman who was manipulated by a man who promised you things that weren't his to give. But I don't pity you either. You chose to be with a married man whose wife was dying of cancer. I didn't know. You chose not to know. There's a difference. I hung up the phone and headed back to Mrs. Henderson's to tell her everything that had happened. The following days were a mix of legal formalities and desperate phone calls from Rob. He tried emotional blackmail, legal threats, and finally, pathetic pleas. Nothing worked. A week after the will reading, Rob showed up one last time at Mrs. Henderson's. This time, he looked completely defeated. Eleanor, he said when I opened the door. I came to apologize, truly, no conditions. What happened with the lawsuit? My lawyer told me I don't have a chance, that I'll just waste money I don't have. And Veronica? Rob hung his head. She left me. When she found out there was no money, she left me. She said she couldn't be with someone who had lied to her about their financial future. I felt a twinge of something that might have been pity, but I quickly crushed it. Rob, want to know something? If you had been a good husband to Carol, if you had treated me with respect after her death, if you had been honest about your feelings instead of cheating on her, things might have been very different. I know, he mumbled. Carol was Carol was an extraordinary woman, and I was too stupid to appreciate her. You weren't stupid, Rob. You were selfish. There's a difference. Is there any chance we can, I don't know, be family in some way? Without money involved, just be family. I looked at this man who had betrayed my daughter, who had publicly humiliated me, who had planned his future based on Carol's money. But I also saw someone who finally understood what he had lost. Rob, Carol was the only thing that connected us, and you destroyed that bond when you decided to betray her. We can't be family because we never really were. Then is this it? We're never going to talk again? This is it. But Rob, I hope you learned something from this experience. I hope the next love of your life is appreciated properly. Rob left that afternoon, and it was the last time I saw him. A month later, I was sitting on the balcony of my new condo in the downtown area. I had bought a small but elegant place overlooking the park where Carol and I used to walk when she was a child. The money had changed my life in ways I never would have imagined, not just because of the financial security, but because of the freedom it gave me. For the first time in decades, every decision I made was completely my own. I had started taking painting classes, something I had always wanted to do but could never afford. I had also signed up for a senior travel group. Next month, we were going to New England. My phone rang. It was Mrs. Henderson. "Eleanor, honey," she said with that warm voice that had been my anchor during the hardest days. "How's the millionaire life?" "It's strange," I admitted, "but good. Very good." "Heard anything about Rob?" "Nothing direct, but my neighbor across the street, who knows people in Rob's old neighborhood, told me he's working full-time again. Apparently he sold some expensive furniture for cash." "And the girl?" "Rumor has it she's already with another man, someone with a nicer car." Mrs. Henderson chuckled. "Some women never learn." "Some women only know one way to survive," I said. "I don't justify her, but I understand her." That afternoon, while organizing some of Carol's things I had kept, I found a photo I hadn't seen before. It was of Carol and me at her college graduation. She was wearing her cap and gown, and I was next to her with a smile of maternal pride so big it covered my whole face. On the back, Carol had written, "To the strongest woman I know, thank you for teaching me that true love is unconditional." I love you, Mom. For the first time since her death, I cried without bitterness. I cried for the loss, but also out of gratitude. Carol had given me exactly what I needed to live the rest of my life with dignity. That night, I dined at an expensive restaurant, something I hadn't done in years. I ordered a glass of the best house wine and silently toasted my daughter. An older couple at the next table smiled at me. "Celebrating something special?" the woman asked. "My independence," I replied. "Newly divorced, newly widowed, and newly free. My daughter taught me it's never too late to start over." As I walked home that night, I thought about everything that had changed in the last few weeks. I had gone from being a homeless, humiliated, and dependent woman to a woman with resources, dignity, and endless options. But more than that, I had discovered something about myself that had been buried for decades. I was a strong, smart, independent woman who didn't need anyone's approval to validate my existence. Carol had given me money, but more importantly, she had given me permission to be completely myself. 6 months later, I was sitting on the terrace of my country house outside the city. I had bought it with part of Carol's inheritance, and it was exactly the kind of place I had always dreamed of living. A small, cozy house with a large garden where I could grow vegetables and flowers. It was a perfect spring morning. The sun shone on my tomato and herb garden, and I was drinking coffee while reading the local paper. In the social section, a photo caught my eye. Rob had remarried. The photo showed him with a woman his age, a widow with 2 teenage children, according to the article. They looked genuinely happy in the picture. The new wife was a school teacher, and the article mentioned Rob had reduced his work hours to spend more time with the family. "Interesting," I murmured, and I truly meant it. Perhaps losing everything he thought he wanted had taught Rob what he really needed. My phone rang. It was my new neighbor, Sophia. a 62-year-old woman who had moved to the country after retiring from her nursing job in New York. "Eleanor," she said, "are you still interested in that Italian cooking class we mentioned?" "Absolutely. When do we start?" "Next week, but there's something else. Do you know Martin, the man who lives in the blue house down the road, the widower with the golden retriever?" "The one. He asked about you yesterday, wanted to know if you'd be interested in joining him at the farmer's market this Saturday." At 65, I was being asked out on a date. The idea made me smile. "Tell him yes," I replied, "but that I'll meet him there. I'm not ready for men to come looking for me yet." Sophia laughed. "Eleanor, I love you. You are the most independent widow I've ever met." After hanging up, I went to my study, where I had framed the last photos I had taken with Carol. In one of them, she was very thin, but she was smiling with that quiet wisdom she had developed during her illness. "I hope you're proud of me," I said to the photo. "I'm living exactly the life you gave me the tools to live." That afternoon, while working in my garden, a certified letter arrived. It was from Attorney Miller, informing me about the annual dividends from Carol's investments. The estate had grown to 1.9 million money that kept generating more money, ensuring I would never have to worry about my financial security again. But as I filed the letter, I realized something important. The money was wonderful, but it wasn't the most valuable thing Carol had left me. The most valuable thing was the lesson that I was worth exactly what she had always believed I was worth. A lot. That night, dining on my terrace overlooking the fields stretching to the horizon, I thought about Rob. I hoped he was happy with his new family. I hoped he had learned to value what he had instead of coveting what he thought he deserved. But mostly I hoped his new wife never had to experience the betrayal Carol had suffered. My phone rang one last time. It was a number I didn't recognize. "Ms. Vasquez," an older woman's voice asked. "This is Lois Medina, Rob's mother." Rob's mother. I hadn't spoken to her since Carol's funeral. "Mrs. Medina, how are you?" "I'm fine, dear. I'm calling to apologize." "Apologize for what?" "For my son, for what he did to you. I only heard the whole story last week, when Rob finally confessed the truth about his affair and how he treated you after the funeral." "Mrs. Medina, you don't have to apologize for your adult son's actions." "But I do. Carol was like a daughter to me, and you were always an exemplary mother. Rob was wrong, terribly wrong, and I'm ashamed of him. Your son is learning from his mistakes. That's what matters. Eleanor, can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Are you happy? Are you okay?" The question caught me by surprise, but the answer came immediately. "I am happier than I have been in years, Mrs. Medina. Carol taught me that life can change completely in a moment, and when it changes, you can choose to be a victim or to be the protagonist of your own story. Carol was a very wise girl. She was the smartest woman I've ever known, and it took me many years to understand exactly how much." After hanging up, I stayed seated on my terrace as the stars appeared one by one in the night sky. I could hear the gentle rustle of the wind through the trees, and in the distance, the occasional sound of a car passing on the rural road. "Thank you, Carol," I said aloud to the universe. "Not just for the money. Thank you for teaching me it's never too late to demand the respect I deserve. Thank you for showing me I can be completely independent. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to live the rest of my life exactly as I want to live it." A soft breeze moved the leaves of the rose bush I had planted in Carol's memory, and for a moment I swear I could feel her approving presence. The next day, I had plans to meet Martin at the market, followed by a painting class in town. And in the afternoon, a video call with Sophia's children, who lived in San Francisco and wanted to meet the fascinating woman their mother couldn't stop talking about. At 65, my life was full of possibilities I had never imagined. Carol had taught me the most valuable lesson of all, that true love doesn't limit you, it frees you. And finally, after all these years, I was completely free.